Hello everybody, welcome to Totally Tabled. My name is Shaggy, and today I'm doing a full solo playthrough of Fabled, the Spirit Lands. In Fabled, we're going to be sending our sages on journeys across the land, visiting fabled places, in order to collect and convert books of wisdom. This copy of the game was provided by the publisher Crowd Games, although I wasn't compensated in any other way for this playthrough. Crowd Games has sponsored one of my playthroughs in the past, so please keep that in mind as you watch this video. Now, I already have everything set up for a solo game. You want to set it up just like you would a two-player game. So we went ahead and we shuffled up the prairie, mountain, and forest lands and dealt out 2 cards for each. We have all our books of wisdom here, the Book of Prairies, Book of Mountains, Book of Forests, and the ultimate goal, the Book of Suns. Those are essentially victory points because at the end of the game, whoever has the most Book of Suns is going to win. We receive our 7 sages, as well as 2 books of prairies, 1 book of mountains, and 1 book of forests. We get 7 sages of another color for our AI opponent. This is the spirit that we're going to be battling against. And as always, they get to cheat a little bit. They get to start with 6 books of prairies, and then 1 book of mountain, 1 book of forests. We also want to shuffle up their trick deck. Be sure to remove the 2 cards that say Fellowship on them. We also shuffle up the Allies deck. And then we get to draw 3 of them and select 1 to keep, which I've already done, and I selected the Sorcerer as my beginning ally. The other 2 cards just get shuffled back into the deck. We start with the first player marker, and up here on the round tracker, we've set it up just like a 2-player game, except we've added this escalation token on round 8. For this playthrough, I'm going to be skipping over the introductory scenario and going straight to scenario 1, Cornerstones of the Universe. I've selected the In the World of the Spirits event deck, shuffled it, and we'll be playing on normal difficulty. And there we go, that's pretty much it. We're ready to begin the game. Don't worry if you don't know how to play, because as always, I'm going to teach it as I play, so let's just dive right in. But we actually start the game at the prologue. Because I'm the first player, I need to pick one of these lands, either one of the face-up lands, or I can draw from the top of any of these decks, and place it out here on the center of the table. I think I'll go ahead and take that one. And then because it was a prairie land, I have to pay a book of prairies to place it out there. It gets immediately refilled. And I get to place one of my sages at the beginning of this path. You can see the path is numbered here, so I get to place my sage right there on the number 1. And now the spirits are going to place out a land card as well, and to do that, they flip the top card of the Allies deck, and they look at this little symbol there in the middle. That symbol shows a prairie land, so they're going to select one of these prairies to put out. They're going to first look at this rightmost card, and they're going to try to place it to the left of the card that we just placed. But they're only going to do that if the path matches up. As you can see here, the path that I placed begins on the top side of the card, comes down here, and ends at the bottom. In this card, the path starts at the top and actually ends at the top. And so because those 2 things end and begin at the same place, they are linked. Those are linked paths, and that's what they want to do. So they are going to place this card. If there wasn't a link, they would then go to the next card and see if that one could link up. And if that one couldn't either, they would just draw from the top of the deck and place it to the left side of the card. But this one works, so they're going to place that. They're going to place one of their sages at the beginning of the path, just like we did. And because it was a prairie card, they have to pay a book of prairies. But because there's an extra prairie card on the table already, that means they have to pay an extra book of prairies. As you'll see, anytime you place a land card and there's other copies of that same land card already on the table, you have to pay a book of prairie for each one. We now refill immediately. And there we go, that's the prologue complete. We can now move on to the first chapter. We're first player, and the first thing that we do on all of our turns is take an action. And we have 4 different actions that we can choose from. One of the main ones we're going to be doing is to select one of these locations and place it onto the board. Anytime we add a new location, we can select from the ones that are face up or draw from the tops of the decks. I actually have my eye on this location right here. Now the cost of adding a location is one book that matches whatever land type it is, so in this case forest. And then for every other forest location that was already out on the board, I'd have to pay a book of prairies for each one. Luckily this is the first forest location, so I don't have to do that. And now I can add this location to this row of locations anywhere I want. I can add it at the beginning, I can add it at the end, I can even add it anywhere in the middle. And there's no restrictions whatsoever. The paths don't have to link up, although you might want to do so. And in this case, I want to add it towards the end here. These paths do happen to link up, as you can see right there. And when you add a location, you can place one of your sages on it. There we go. That's the end of the action phase. Now we go to the movement phase. For the movement phase, we're going to declare either prairies, mountains, or forests. And then all sages in those terrains are going to move. Ours will move 2 spaces, and our opponents will move 1. So I am going to declare prairie. So because of that, my sage gets to move 2 spaces along the path, and their sage gets to move 1. Your sages always have to move forward, they can't move backwards. And when they stop in one of these special Fabled lands locations, then something happens. We'll get to that very shortly. Now, before we move on, I actually have a special ability that comes into play right here because of my sorcerer. It says that when you declare movement in prairies, which we did, after movement, but before visiting Fabled places, distribute as many movement points, is what that symbol means, among your sages in mountains and forests as you have sages in prairies. That's a little confusing, but what it means is that because I have 1 sage in a prairie land, I can distribute 1 movement point to my sages in either forests or mountain terrains. And I have someone in a forest right here, so they get to move 1 space as well. If I had more sages in prairie lands, that would be better. I'd get to distribute more movement points because of my sorcerer. But for now, I just got that 1 extra. No one's on a Fabled place, so that's it. That's the end of my turn. At this point, if any of these cards were free of any sages at all, they would actually get removed. That's not the case, so now we move over to the spirit player. The spirit player always starts their turn the same way by just drawing the top card of the ally deck and looking at that symbol right there in the middle. In this case, that's showing the mountain terrain. Whatever is showing there is their target terrain type, and they're going to want to place that type of terrain onto the board if they can. In order to do so, they're going to need the correct books of wisdom to pay for the land, which they have. So they're always going to start trying to place the rightmost face-up card. And they have a few requirements that they have to meet in order to place the card. So first, they obviously have to pay for it. In this case, there's 1 mountain terrain, so they pay a book of mountains. There are no other mountains out, so they don't have to pay any books of prairies. And now they want to place the card directly to the left of one of my sages. So they're not going to place it here, because that wouldn't be directly to the left of one of my sages. They're going to completely skip that, and they're going to try to fit it in to here. They're then going to look to see if the paths match, because they want to link up the paths if they can. In this case, it might be hard to see, but the path here starts on this side at the bottom and ends over here at the bottom. And this path here starts at the top. So those don't link up, and so they're going to move on. They don't want to place it there. They're then going to try to place it here. This is directly left to one of my sages. And look at here, the paths actually connect. The last criteria is if they're placing it in the middle like this, then the backside also needs to connect. And in this case, it does, right? The path ends at the bottom and begins at the bottom. So this is a legal placement for them. They are happy to place it right there. If that hadn't worked, they would have moved on to the next face-up card, tried the same thing. And if that also didn't work, then they would just draw the top card of the deck and place it at the beginning of the line. But this works, and so they get to put a sage out. Now, the mountain region is a little special because there are 2 paths on each of these mountain regions. There's the main path right here, which has sort of a beginning and an end. And so they get to place a sage at the beginning of that. But there's also a dead end path up there. And they also get to place a sage up there. That path can't be connected to in either way. So once that sage finishes that path, they'll be done and come off the board. There we go. That's the end of that. And now they do their movement phase by declaring movement in whatever their target region is. So in this case, it'll be mountains. And just like on our turn, they get to move their sages 2 spaces. And if we had any sages in mountain regions, we would get to move ours 1 space. Unfortunately, we don't, so they just move 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. They did not reach a fabled place, so we don't have to worry about that. And that's it. They don't have allies with special abilities. They're ignoring everything else that's on that card. If they had collected any trick cards, then they would get to play them now. You'll see that later, but they didn't do that. And again, if any card is completely uncovered with no sage on it, then it gets removed. But we get to skip all that and just move straight on to Chapter 2. That blue token means we're going to have our first event. And so we just draw the top card of this shuffled event deck, and it says Will of the Gods. Once per turn during your action phase, you may take 2 actions instead of 1. These must be different actions. That will be an active event until we get to the next blue token. So that's incredible. We're actually going to get to take 2 different actions rather than just 1. That's pretty crazy. Well, I'll tell you what, right away, I see a mountain region that I really like. So I am going to, for my first action, now that we get 2, I'm going to actually place this mountain region right here at the beginning. So that's going to cost the corresponding Book of Wisdom. And because there's one other mountain region out here, I have to pay a Book of Prairies. And I get to place a mage here on this dead end path, as well as the main path. And now I can take a second action. So before I said there were 4 different types of actions we can take. A second type of action we can take is just to take 2 Books of Prairie and add them to our supply. That might be a good idea since I'm completely out of Books of Wisdom right now. Another action we could take is just to move one of our sages 1 step. Yeah, you know, I think I will do that. So I'm going to take this sage and just move them forward 1 space. The last potential action that we could take is to perform either 1 or 2 conversions. Now you'll see conversions later, but basically that just means taking 2 of any type of Book of Wisdom and turning it in for 1 of the higher tier. So these books are actually tiered. And so, for instance, we could take 2 Books of Prairie and turn them into a Book of Mountains, or we could take 2 Books of Mountains and turn them into a Book of Forests, or 2 Books of Forests and turn them into the Book of Suns. We can also do conversions the other way if we wanted. So we could take a Book of Forests and turn them into 2 Books of Mountains if we wanted to. Again, you'll see conversions later. We'll be doing plenty of conversions. And now for movement, I think I am going to select the prairies. And so my mage moves 2 spaces and gets to this special location here. You can see it's sort of highlighted. When you stop on one of these fabled places, you can decide either to stay on the path or for free move to the fabled place and activate it. Now on this one, we actually have a choice between 2 different fabled places. We can either go to this one here, which will just get us a Book of Mountains, or we could move to this one here, which has a special ability that lets us take any of these places where one of our sages is located and move it to anywhere else on this track. Now, I actually think I want to do that, so I'm going to move up to this fabled spot right there. Now, we can't forget that the spirit, they get to move 1 because they're also on a prairie land. And then with my special ability, before I activate the fabled place, I can take 1 movement. And I can do it to any of my sages in forests or mountains. I want to move this sage 1 space. And now they've also reached a fabled place, which they will visit as well. And now we can activate them in any order that we want. This one is very simple. It just gives us 3 books of prairies, which is great because we were completely out of books of wisdom. And then this one lets us move really any card that has our sages on them. I want to move this one. We're going to take this and we're going to just slip it in right over here. There we go. Now there's a couple of reasons I did that. One is I really like the idea of my sage coming onto this card right here and getting all this good stuff. But I also like the idea of messing up these paths here and here so that they don't connect anymore. And so their sages will hopefully just reach a dead end and not be able to continue on the path and just have to come back into their supply. We'll see if that ends up working out for me, but that's what I did. And there we go. That's the end of my turn. Okay, the spirit player. Ooh, okay. Their target terrain type is forests. They have a book of forests right there, so they can pay for this. It's going to cost that, and because there's already one forest out, they're going to have to pay a book of prairies as well. And let's see if they can fit this one in anywhere. They would put it here, but that doesn't link, so they're going to move on. They would put it here, but again, that won't link. But right here, there is a link. So that's where they're going to place it. Links right there, links right there. Now keep in mind the spirit player doesn't take advantage of the events at all. They completely ignore that. And now they're going to declare movement in the forest, so they get to move 2 spaces. They will always stop for a fabled place. Even if it means they have to lose some movement points, they will always get to that spot and stop, and then move into the fabled place to take advantage of it. We're going to get 1 movement. And then we activate the fabled place. Now for them, sometimes the fabled places behave the same way as they do for us, and sometimes they have unique abilities just for them. And luckily we have quite a few little player aids here that we can consult. This one here shows us some of the different fabled places that have special effects just for the spirit. In this case, you can see this one behaves the same way for them as it does for us. And we also have another player aid here that actually describes all of the different fabled places and exactly what they do. So this is a fairy inn, and it says to take books of prairies equal to the total number of locations with your sages. So for them, they have 1, 2, 3 places, and so they're going to get 3 books of prairies. And there we go. They didn't activate any trick cards, so they're done. We move on to Chapter 3. We've reached this red token, which means we get a new ally. So we're going to draw the top 3 and pick 1. I think I'm actually going to take the Firebird. They're going to let me receive a Book of Prairies, and one of my sages will get to take 1 movement every time I add a new location. The 2 that I didn't choose get shuffled back into the ally deck. Now be sure not to shuffle the ones that the spirit has been drawing. You have to make sure you keep those because those might get referred to from some other cards. Okay, there we go. Now we get to take actions, and again, because of the Will of the Gods event, we get to take 2 different actions. If I wanted to add a location, the only one I could add is a prairie. I would spend 1 book, and then these other 2 because of those 2 prairies that are already there. I think for my first action, I'll just take 2 more books of prairies. And then for my second action, I'm going to add a location. It will be this prairie location. So that will cost 3 books of prairies. I'm going to go a little crazy, and I'm going to add it right here. Place my sage. So I've created a link right here, but not up there. but we have lots of time to fix that. That's no big deal. Now, after adding a location, I receive one book of prairies, and one of my sages can take a step. I'm going to have this sage take a step, and they're going to immediately visit that fabled place, which is going to give them a book of forests. Okay, now time for the movement phase. I'm going to declare prairies. So we're going to go 1, 2, 1, 2. Because these are linked, they just get to keep moving on the path. This one gets to go 1. And now because of my sorcerer, I have 2 sages on prairies. So I can distribute 2 more movement among my other sages in either forests or mountains. I'm going to have 2 right there. Ooh, or should I split that up? Yeah, maybe we'll split that up. We'll go 1 and 1. No other fabled places. We are done. And now we look here. We see this card is empty. No sages, so it gets removed. We just discard it, and we just fill in the gap. There we go. Spirits go. Okay, target is the forests. Now, there are a couple of reasons why the spirits might not add a location. One reason is they may be out of sages, right? If you can't add a sage, then you can't add a location. They'll also refuse to add a location if the cost is going to be 4 or more additional books of prairies. In other words, if there's already 4 of a specific type of terrain, they're not going to add a 5th. The third reason that they won't add a location is if they don't have enough books of wisdom. And that's the case right now. They simply don't have a book of forests, so they won't be able to add a forest location, which is their target terrain. When that happens, they instead get one of these trick cards. They're not going to activate it yet. We're just going to put it here to remind us. They're going to activate it in just a minute. Additionally, when the only reason that they're not adding a new location is because they don't have enough books of wisdom, then they're going to actually get to receive a book of prairies, and then they're going to perform 1 conversion. When they perform conversions, they always want to receive the highest tier type of book of wisdom. In this case, there's only 1 type of conversion that they can do, which is to convert 2 books of prairie into a book of mountains. There we go. So that's what they're going to get instead of placing a new location. Now they still have a movement phase, and they're going to declare forests. So they get to move 2 spaces. They're going to immediately go to that fabled place. We get 1 movement. And that fabled location is just giving them a book of mountains. Anytime you visit a fabled location, you immediately go back onto the path when you're done resolving it. And if it wasn't clear, you have to choose to either resolve that fabled place or not at that moment. You can't go back and visit it later. Now they get to resolve all their trick cards. They only have this one, so we just flip it over and we just do exactly what it says. Now we ignore this bottom part. That's for a more difficult game. Since we're playing normal difficulty, we ignore the bottom. We just look at this middle, and it says the spirits distribute movement among their sages equal to the total number of forest allies they revealed during the game. And they are limited to sort of a maximum of 3 movement. So that's where we look at this pile of allies that they revealed, and we look at how many forest allies they've revealed. We have 1, 2... And so they get to distribute 2 movement points. Whenever they're distributing movement like this, they're just going to go all the way to the left. They'll give that sage 1 movement. Then they'll go to the next sage. They have 2 on this one, so they're going to look at the one on top and give that one movement. And there we go. That gets discarded. Oh, I actually did this wrong. Since these 2 are on the same number on the path, both are on 3, then the spirit will actually move the one that's on the main path first. So they're going to go to 4. Okay, there we go. And we're on to chapter 4. Chapter 4 has nothing special going on, so we just get to take 2 actions. Ooh, I have a lot of options here. Yeah, I think I want to add a location. I want to add this location right here. And I want to do it right in there. Running a little low on sages here. Now that's going to cost 1 prairie, 2 prairie, 3 prairie. And because of the Firebird, I get one of those books right back. And then one of my sages can take 1 movement. I guess it's going to be this one. And now I actually get a second action because of Will of the Gods. I could take 2 prairie books. That would be helpful. Or I could move 1. I think I'll do the 1 movement. I'm going to move this sage to here. They're going to immediately get to go to this fabled place, which is going to give me 4 movement to distribute. So let's go 1, 2, 3. They'll move in there. And then 4. So they move back. Now I can activate this fabled place. They move back and I just get 4 books of prairie. And there we go. That was just my actions. I now go to my movement phase. Gonna declare prairie. So 2, 2, 2. They get 1. And now, because of Sorcerer, I get 3 additional movement. So I want to take 1 here. Mistake alert, the Sorcerer only lets me move sages on mountain and forest terrains. So this is definitely not allowed. And visit that fabled place. I want to go 2 just to get them onto a prairie location. And then I'm going to move this one 3 up to there. Multiple sages can exist in the same location on these paths. They're not blocking each other or interacting in any way. So it looks like we're just activating 1 place of power. That's 4 more books of prairies. Okay, the spirit's turn. Wow, forest again. Amazing. So just like last time, they simply don't have the right books of wisdom. So they're going to get a trick card. They get a book of prairies, and now they're going to do 1 conversion. Normally, they would convert these 2 books of mountain into a book of forest, but there's a little bit of a rule. Until we reach this escalation point, so until we get to chapter 8, they will not do a conversion that will leave them with less than 3 books of prairies, 1 book of mountains, and 1 book of forests. So because this conversion would leave them with less than 1 book of mountain, they're not going to do it. Instead, they're going to convert these 2 into a book of mountains. That's a little tricky, but there we go. We're going to activate forests for their movement. They get 2, I get 1. No fabled places being visited. So now we're going to activate this trick card. Heartbeat Magic. It says the spirits perform, and that icon means a conversion. So the spirits are going to perform conversions equal to the total number of locations with your sages in the spirit land. But they're limited to 3 conversions. So yeah, so they're definitely going to do all 3 if they can. So their first conversion, boom, they're able to do it now because it leaves at least 1 of those behind. But that's all the conversions they're going to do, because if they did another one, they would be left with less than 3 books of prairies. And so that's it. That's all they're going to do. But now they're going to be pretty set up next time to add a location. So that's good for them. And it looks like that's it. That was round 4. Here at Chapter 5, we have 2 tokens to deal with. So we have our second event. So we draw another event card, and it's actually going to replace the previous event. Now, because this is our second event, we're going to be looking at the top power. If this was our third event, we would look at the bottom. So this is aided by spirits. The top one says after adding a location, your sage in that location, or both sages if it's a mountain location, can take one step forward. Okay, cool. It's a little bit like our Firebird, so we're going to get a lot of extra movement when we add a location. Unfortunately, though, we're only going to get one action now instead of two, so that's a bummer. We now have that red token, so that's going to let us either get our third and final ally, or we can activate this bottom part of one of our allies. So I've kind of been ignoring those bottom parts, but if we wanted to right now, we could say activate this bottom part of our sorcerer, which would give us an ability that we could do once per game, which would let us do 4 conversions whenever one of our sages visits a fabled place in a prairie. I actually think I want my third ally. So once again, we're going to draw 3 and pick 1. I think I'm going to go with the Swamp Witch. The Swamp Witch is going to come with these 5 different tokens. And when our sages visit a matching fabled place, then we're going to receive something special based on the token. Here they are. Now it's our turn and we get to take an action, and gosh, I really want to get another prairie out. It's going to be expensive. I think it's going to be worth it, though. I really do. Yeah, I want to add this prairie right in there. It's going to cost 4 books. Ouch. There we go. Gonna put a sage on, our final sage. That's not great. Because of Firebird, we get one of those back, and we get to take a step. Let's just have this one take a step like that. And then because of Aided by Spirit, the one that we added, they get to take a step. Okay, and now we're doing movement. I'm calling prairies. So 1, 2. They get 1, and they're going to visit one of these fabled places. I'll get back to that in a second. 1, 2. 1, 2. They're going to have some fabled places to visit, and that's going to be a choice. And 1, 2. Okay, I think I'm going to have one of the mages visit here, one of the mages visit there. Because anytime there's 2 places of power, you can choose. Now, I could have had them both go to the same one. That would have been fine. Now, when the spirits have a choice, as they do right here, of which fabled place to go, we're actually going to check this chart right here, which is going to show the priority list for, where they want to go. And as we can see, this place is high up on the priority list, so that makes it easy. They're definitely going to visit that one right there. Okay, so now, after movement, but before visiting fabled places, I get to distribute, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 among your sages in mountains or forests. Oh, I hope I didn't make that mistake earlier. I might have made that mistake. I don't get to do it just anywhere. It's just my other sages in mountains or forests. Okay, oh, I might have made that mistake before. If I did, I'm sorry. I will add that correction. So it looks like it's just going to be this one who just reaches the end of their path and comes off instead of moving on. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and they will stop at that place of power. Okay, let's start with the spirit player. And as we can see here, they are visiting the Universal Library. That's going to let them take 2 books of wisdom and convert them 2 tiers up. And we can look on here, it shows that there's a special condition here. It says the spirits try to transform books of wisdom of higher tiers first. For transformations, they ignore keeping a reserve of books of wisdom. So normally they would worry about their reserves, but when they're transforming here, they ignore that restriction. So they are going to take 2 of these and convert it into one 2 tiers up, which means they're going to get a Book of Forests. And then they're going to go back. There we go. Now we're going to resolve, and we have a ton of things to resolve here. We get to do it in whatever order we want. I think I'll start with this sage here who's just getting 4 books of prairies. That one's nice and simple. But that actually matches one of our Swamp Witch's tokens. So because we activated that, we're going to get to distribute 3 movement points. We then just flip this over to show that we've used it. I think I want those 3 movement points to be... Ooh, that's a hard one. Let's go 1, 2, 3. And I think we'll also visit that place of power, and we'll convert 2 of our prairies into a Book of Forest as well. Now, visiting that didn't get us anything extra. Okay, so we can come here. That's going to let us convert at a rate of 3 books to 2, which is a slightly better exchange rate. So we can take 3 books of prairies and get 2 books of mountains. And here we're actually doing the exact same thing. Now, just to hammer this home, at the end of the game, we want to have as many books of sun as we can. So with 1 conversion here, we could turn these 2 into a Book of Sun. And with a couple of conversions here, we could eventually get those 4 books into a Book of Sun. So we have maybe 2 victory points floating around there. This isn't exactly a high-scoring game, you know. If we can get up to maybe 5 or 6 books of sun, I think we'll be doing pretty well. Now, as we can see here, this card doesn't have anybody on it, so it gets discarded. And also this card here. So there we go. We're going to slide everything together. Now that we're exactly halfway through the game, I'm actually going to stop here, play through the rest of the game, and then come back at the end to show you final scoring. So let's go ahead and use the magic of the spirits to transition. And there we go. As if by magic, we have reached the end of the game. We completed Chapter 10, and now it's time for the epilogue. We managed to collect 5 sun books, so it's essentially 5 points. These other books are wasted. They could come into play for tiebreakers, but our game is completely over. The Spirit, on the other hand, they get to do a couple of things during the epilogue. First of all, they can convert their books of prairies into books of mountains at a 3-to-1 ratio. So because they have 9, they can get 3 books of mountains. There we go. They can now convert these books of mountains into books of forests, again at a 3-to-1 ratio. And finally, they can just do 4 extra conversions. They only have 1 conversion left. Grabbing them 1 extra point, and there we go, that's the end. We have beat the spirits 5 points to 3. Now, there's just a couple of extra rules that I want to mention here at the very end. When we got to Chapter 8 and we reached that escalation token, the spirits stopped building any locations. They stopped adding locations to the board. Instead, they just got one of their trick cards, and then they moved straight into the movement phase. So they did that for Chapters 8, 9, and 10. They also stopped trying to reserve certain books of wisdom. They were just freely converting without having to worry about that. And as far as those trick cards go, there's actually several ways for them to generate those. As we saw, when they don't add a new location to the board, they get a trick card. But they also get a trick card anytime one of their sages is returned back to their supply. Furthermore, anytime that they are able to do 1 or more conversions and they can't do any at all, then instead, as sort of a consolation, they would get a trick card. And furthermore, if they were to ever play a trick card and it would have no effect, they would get another one to replace it. The final way that they could get a trick card is if they ever do a substitution. If you ever go to one of these fabled places and you either cannot do the action or you choose not to, then you can do a substitution instead, where basically you just get 2 prairie books. Likewise, the spirit would do that if they ever couldn't take advantage of a fabled place, but in addition to the 2 books of prairies, they would also get a trick card. Also, there's many different ways to increase and decrease difficulty. There's different scenarios with different rules, and there's even a co-op mode in addition to the different competitive modes. So there's a lot to explore in the box. But there you go, that was Fabled, the Spirit Lands. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.